became the Public Services Social Value Act 2012 after one of the longest gestation periods for private members' legislation in parliamentary history. We might one day look back on this act as one of the most revolutionary pieces of legislation.
So I've been thinking a lot about, after that research and in my work with various companies, what would mature measurement look like? What would a socially valuable mature measurement framework look like? And I wanted to share with you just 7 kind of highlights from that, really, to get you thinking.
Work around kind of community land trusts and other forms of initiative, and that has led to a shift in that procurement spend. So there's now an increased spend of £70 million through each of those 7 anchor institutions being delivered by organisations based within Preston, and an increase of around £200 million in wider Lancashire.
Obviously the question that was raised earlier about what is the problem that we're trying to address, I think is a really important one. And if you ask that of health, in terms of the social value or the sustainable development space, it's about health outcomes.
In 2016 we went on a series of conversations around the country, looking at different cities to discuss cross-sector what would make a vibrant local economy.
Business in the Community, it's a charity. It's actually the Prince of Wales Responsible Business Network. We've been in existence for over 30 years, and we work with business members to support them in being as responsible as they can be. Most of the businesses you've heard mentioned today are part of our network.
And we do end up working quite a lot on commissioning because it matters an awful lot to a lot of charities. I think the key point I want to kind of leave you with, and this obviously came out in the first session, is that we do need to measure social impact. There's some debates about exactly how, but ultimately, if we're to allocate resources correctly, we've got to get some kind of badge on this. I mean, it's always an issue when you're working in government and you're spending money. You are trying to balance an outcome, which may be a desirable outcome, against an increased cost.
It's a pleasure to speak at this Neil Stewart Associates event, and also a pleasure to speak to an audience that is embedded and engaged with local government. And I speak as someone who was a local councillor for 12 years. And when I reflect upon austerity Britain, I'm struck by the fact that local government is absolutely at the forefront of massive cuts that are having enormous impact on our communities, and I want to pay tribute to the people involved in that. But I've been invited to talk about the contribution that universities make to their local area and their increasingly important role as anchor institutions.
There's one aspect of social value and the delivery thereof, and indeed the procurement process and everything else that hasn't been mentioned today, and I think it is very, very well worth mentioning. And that is that an organisation which is seen to have a mission, seen to have a purpose, seen to be relevant to the society and to the environment around it, whether it's public sector, private sector or voluntary sector, if it can get its employees on board with that, and that's not just the procurement officials, this comes back to the point I was making earlier about middle managers, but actually everybody else as well, then there's a dividend to be earned in that as well, through employee engagement, which helps people to be more loyal, it helps them to be more longer lasting as employees, and that saves costs. It helps them be better ambassadors for their organisation, and it actually helps with productivity as well. So that's an aspect of everything we've been talking about today, which contributes to organisations of the future being so much more relevant to their societies, environments and indeed the economy.